Hi, Latinos in Clinical Research Community. Today, I'm here with Ashley, Dan, and Chris, and we're going to be talking with Ash Ricci, who is the founder of Couch Health and the Campaign for Change Demand Diversity. Thanks, Ash, for being here today with us. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. I'm big fans of the work you guys are doing. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. So for me, I am from a neuroscience background. And I got into neuroscience because I'm from an Indian background. And my parents always wanted me to be a doctor, like every Indian parent. But I did not have the aptitude, the intelligence, or the patience, to be honest, to be a doctor. So I wanted to do business. That's what I've always wanted to do. But then at college age, I was about 19, no, actually 18. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, this sort of set me on a path that has really taken me here to have this conversation with you guys, because he didn't understand his own symptomology. English was his second language in the UK. Same for my mother. I was an only child and a young kid, basically. So we just didn't know what to do, and we were getting sent on this through this healthcare system with information being thrown at us that we could not understand, we didn't get. And it was a traumatic experience for me as a young man. Obviously, my mother and my father when he was finally diagnosed, was given 6 months to live. He fought for 6 years, but unfortunately he passed. But for me, as I went through my career, I was like, why was he never given the opportunity to join a clinical trial? Prostate cancer, young man, I mean, early 50s, surely he was ripe for a study. And actually, I later on found out that his consultant was actually a lead PI for a global study. So at the same time that my dad was under his care. So this all set me down this path through my career. I tried to work in a research lab. I was useless. And so I left that within 3 months and fell into like a healthcare advertising sort of space. And even in that space, where key opinion leaders, they are our gods, as it were, in drug development and drug promotion. And I didn't see any diversity there. They were all affluent, white males, if I could be just honest with you. And so it's something that's stayed with me my whole career. And then finally, I got to a stage in my career where it's like, I can do my own thing, finally. So I set up Couch with the mission to just try and make communications, research, and whatever we do just inclusive. And it's only been in the last couple of years since COVID-19, George Floyd, for me, that our business has just exploded because the world has become more aware of the challenges that we all face within research. So yeah, that is a very quick whistle-stop tour of me and who I am. But yeah, that's over to you.
Wow, this is an amazing story. Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you for all the work you're doing. And it's stories like that really just kind of, at least for me, they really move me, because it's very unfortunate, that not only were y'all unable to, or being placed in that possible scenario, but the PI was very much involved. That right there, it feels is ridiculous, and a perfect example as to how not ideal this system is.
Absolutely.
Again.
And I think for me, if I can, really, my mission is, if I can just stop one family going through what we went through, if I can just do even one a day, one a month, whatever it be, I sleep better, because I think that is what we're fundamentally here for, whether it's, from a site perspective, patient perspective, whatever. We're here to just improve everyone's lives. So that's my driving factor. So when my team are getting stressed out about timelines and deadlines for, the website or the flyer, I'm like, just get on with it. First world problems. You could save someone's life. So just put it in perspective. Doesn't go down well all the time, but yes.
So I guess at least for me, and I'm sure Judy and Chris have some, and Dan have some questions, but do you feel that, the possibility of that scenario was possibly because there was maybe like an issue with translation and things like that? Because I know that for Latinos in clinical research, we do touch a lot. We focus on Latinos more specifically because there's a language barrier, right? But we are open to all ethnicities because of this issue, right? I think it's a very broader issue, and I know that even to this day we talk about issues of translation, and they're not being, even when there is translative documentation, it's not accurate or it's not helpful and all those kinds of things. Do you feel that that was part of that scenario?
I think that is part of it, in the fact that we weren't able to understand, and the information we were given was just, like, it was not patient friendly at all. But I think for me, I think it's the bias more than the information, because I think, so my father had, immigrant, he had one job, but he was working, like 60, 70 hours a week, really just to put food on the table. Same with my mother. They were very ambitious people, so they moved into a nicer area, but so they took a leap, which their mortgage was exceptional, and then the recession happened at the same time. So loads of things happened, but they were working really hard. And I just wonder, that stigma around, I don't know, immigrants having more than one job sometimes, not wanting to get involved in clinical trials, whether that just stops the PI from actually ever just having that discussion. I think there's that. And if the discussion did happen, I don't think my dad would have understood. I'll be honest with you. I don't think I would have understood. And certainly my mother wouldn't have understood. Yeah.
I was just talking to Judy about this before you guys got on. Because we're actually pretty close as far as like distance from each other. Our sites, we're in an underserved area, basically near the Mexican border. And, I had told Judy, like, hey, I have a brand new site here in Yuma. And so far we've only screened like a handful of patients, and none of them have been Hispanic, or underserved for that matter. Like, one of my patients is a pharmacist, the other one's an attorney. It's not what I expected, coming out here. And Jaime, who's our NP, Judy interviewed him. He's a nurse practitioner. He told me, like, even for this new study we're about to get, it actually stuck out to me. Is the monitor said, hey, I noticed you don't have a Spanish ICF. Do you need one? And I said, yeah, of course. We're like right here, underserved. Like, it's very important to have Spanish. And then Jaime, who's Mexican, like as you can get, he basically said, yeah, but it's not that important because they've been extremely hesitant. So like we can start without it. So it's like, if this guy's saying it's gonna be tough, and what you're saying is like immigrants tend to be skeptical about these kind of things, which I definitely can see. I'm a child of immigrants as well from Romania. Like, why do you think that is? What is it about being an immigrant that just gives you like a higher dose of skepticism compared to non-immigrants?
I'd put it down to history. So, for example, in the Indian population, obviously the British Empire, a lot of colonialism. So there is distrust to that institution anyway. I'm talking from an Indian British perspective. There are cases of forced sterilization in Puerto Rico. There's research that's been done that is just unethical. We can always talk about Tuskegee. We can talk about so many other examples. But I think in different cultures there are different stories. So, for example, I was talking to. I use my mum. She's a great example. COVID-19. She's still getting WhatsApps from home in India. And they're saying just put turmeric in your milk and drink that every night and you won't get COVID-19. So there's also a lot of misinformation out there, and they'll trust home rather than healthcare, if you know. And I think that's why we need to really improve representation in the research. So I think what you're doing is great, Dan. You know, having that sort of all of you actually having those sites, you know, with representation in it, it will have an impact in the long run. But we've got a lot of mistrust to tackle.
Yeah, and I agree with Ash and Dan. It's mistrust with the medical system, the community that you're in, but we keep saying that. So what are we going to do to change it? That's the next thing that we need to do. And that's what we're trying to do. Like at my site, it's like, okay, we keep going in circles with that. Okay, we know that. So like, what are we doing to change? Well, we make sure we have the consents. We make sure we go in the community and we educate everybody who doesn't understand clinical trials. If it means speaking to every single person, that's what we're going to have to do. And that's how we're going to make this change. That's just part of it. But, you know, that's the conversations we got to have.
You're spot on. I mean, I think so. We work exclusively pretty much with sponsor-led studies. So, you know, the sponsors get us on board. And yeah, the discussions we're having is just no point doing, you know, the Facebook adverts. I mean, like, let's do more than that. We need to go to the community. We need to talk to them, and let's choose the right kinds of sites. Let's stop looking at the big academic institutions. Let's also look at more community-based sites and so on. So a lot of that is, and it all comes down to that feasibility that they do, which is just a survey to a site. And no site is going to go, no, we can't recruit diverse participants. You know, it's a business. So really, I think the model of how they set up research is broken, if I be honest with you, and it needs revamping. I wish I had the answer, because then, you know, I'd be a very rich man. Yeah.
I mean, I would
Cool.
definitely say that, you know, this, like what you were just talking about, you know, the approach like internally and how they're doing their processing. I feel like this is a multi-tier level issue. You know, I know that right now what a lot of the movement is, oh, let's hire diverse people, which is very important, because that also kind of helps with the grassroots aspect, right, through family and friends and things like that. But there's so much more than that, right? And I feel that the communication, if there's really, you know, want and movement from the sponsor, the CRO, to actually make these types of change, they have to be hitting at different levels at all points, right? And it's not just hiring, you know, individuals that are in research, because, you know, when they're hiring individuals for research, a lot of the times they are hiring people with education, right? Are you also addressing those that are in rural areas that do not have this education, right? That only have the experience? Are you dealing with the doctors, the physicians that want to know about research? And I mean, there's just so many routes that they need to take for there to be actual change and movement, and in fast enough pace, right? Because I think what COVID taught us was that there's so many breaks in the system and so many things that are not working. And so, you know, we're going through, I guess you could say, the corporate route of fixing this issue, but we all know that that takes too long, right? And we need to move it faster. And so it's kind of, you know, I feel that aside from just going about their ways of doing inward change, they need to fasten the process of collaborating with those that are outside, that already kind of have ideas, plans, and fixtures in place to really implement or help get it moving forward, right? And so, I mean, I'm assuming, you know, through your company, this is what part of what y'all are doing, which is really great.
Yeah, we're trying. I keep all the discussions I have is, yes, we need the long-term strategies, you know, getting in new PIs, even within the pharma companies, you know, building that diversity. But then there also has to be something we do now, because otherwise we're talking about change in 25, 30 years time, and that's not good enough. So we've, as in Couch, have developed a few services and approaches that I think are effective, really effective. And I've got some case studies that I'm just about to sign off and be able to launch. But, you know, we're doing community outreach now in the US. We're doing community outreach in Brazil. We're doing it in Western Europe, who are, you know, behind. You know, they think there is no issue in those countries, in these, but there's issues everywhere. Unfortunately, equity as a concept, it's a concept, it's not reality at the moment. So yeah, so we train up like site staff on how to spot their own biases before they go and start a study. And my ideal would be that, I know all sites are overburdened, and I know they're overworked, but if they could just take on a bit more training, I do think we can break down some barriers that will help, because cultural competency, cultural awareness training, there's evidence out there they have zero impact on the workplace. So why do we keep doing that? You know, I'm sure you've all done it, I've done it, and you know, it doesn't really help. So we've developed something called the cultural safety program, which is essentially cultural awareness is me just understanding who you are as people. Cultural competency means that, you know, I can speak to you and just say, hi, how are you, Ashley, how are you doing? But if I'm safe, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? You know, how are things going with the family? What's, you know, more cultural references, and I'm more confident to speak that. And I think that's something that we're developing, and that could really help with engagement, I think.
Well, this is just an observation. With COVID, if there's such a mistrust in communities, I don't think COVID helped that in the least, especially with the information that's coming out now. There are people that were forced to get vaccinated, and now they're getting the information on how it may be harmful to them. Yeah. Why would anybody, let alone minority populations, want to participate in research?
I agree. And then it almost became a grab. You know, it was in the media. Oh, it's happening with minority groups. So suddenly these, you know, pharma companies did big press releases. You know, they blacked out their social media. And they were like, yes, and they pivoted their model. But it became, you know, almost like, you're Asian, you're brown skinned, I want you in my study. You're black, I want you in my study. And it's just not authentic at the moment. And which, I don't know about you, if someone was to say, I don't know, oh, I want an Indian person, someone from an Indian background in this study, I'd be like, why? Why do you want me in this study? So I'd be very skeptical myself. So again, it's training on communication. Yeah, that's my take.
And I completely agree with that, what you just stated. Why on earth do you want a specific patient population? Now, there may be good reason and rationale behind that, and I think there often is, but yeah. I certainly would question that.
Absolutely, and I think it comes from how these studies are set up. If it was inclusive by nature, you know, and the inclusion and exclusion criteria not being so stringent, you know, certain demographics. I'm working on a study where there's 28 daily site visits. Me as a healthy man, I am not going to go to the clinic 28 days in a row. So imagine someone who may have more than one job or has childcare, or has, you know, that is automatically going to eliminate the underserved population. And it's going to be privilege.
Absolutely.
Have those opportunities. Yeah.
It happened to me 2 weeks ago. We had a patient for a study. She qualified. This is a tough study to get people in to begin with. She qualified. She's referred by the doctor. The doctor told me her only issue, she qualifies for every aspect of the study. It's literally the needle in the haystack they're looking for, but she works 3 jobs and there's no way she can do an 8-hour visit. And the way this study is designed is like multiple 8-hour visits. That's hard enough for the staff, like my coordinator who I'm paying to be there, right? It's hard enough for them to be there that entire time, never mind the patient. So we couldn't put the patient in. No. And that's exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah. We just need to educate the scientists who are doing, you know, developing these protocols, just to go out into the real world, have some conversations. And
I don't know, man, because yeah, we should, but so we have this medical writer who we were working with on an academy, Christine. Shout out Christine Spaghinetti. She's amazing. So she works with these people, and you know, I mean, to play devil's advocate, they are spending lots of money, so we can't fault them for trying to squeeze every ounce of data they can out of the study when they make a study. But that's at the expense of eliminating a large majority of patients who would actually qualify because they're real world patients.
That's it. Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I think the conversations that are happening right now when it comes to at protocol design stage, I think are still too tokenistic. and I think if they were just to put a little bit more time with not even just patient groups, but just understanding more with more grassroots, what impact is it going to have on, you know, the local communities? I just think buy-in could be done quicker.
So what should we do as sites? Because like now that that study I'm explaining, that was the first study that I got. So I was very excited as a site owner to get a study, to get a study. Now that I have like 6 other ones, I'm regretting taking that study on. And I actually feel guilty because by me taking that study on, I'm letting that sponsor know, hey, it's okay to do a study like this because we'll take it and we'll try. And there's other sites out there. So I mean, at some point, the sites need to also say, hey, we're not doing this study.
And we can, though. That's the thing is, I think these protocols are created, right? We have them at the site level. Once we start having these issues, we need to go back to the sponsor and be like, hey, this is not working. And this is the reasons why. Is there any way you can modify, which sometimes they do. They can go in and change some things around. But if we're not speaking up and letting them know, well, then they're going to continue and then still question why recruitment is so hard. But yet, hey, your protocol design is hard to recruit for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so sorry. And then when you consider, you know, if these are new PIs too, new site owners, new starting PIs, you're easily going to offset them, you know, from the experience, right? And even worse if they are from rural areas or they're diverse backgrounds with multiple, you know, bilingual, trilingual backgrounds. You know, you want to keep those physicians, right? And so it just, like you said, you know, they're not really keeping the different things in mind here. And you know, I guess not to fully plug, but you know, that's kind of one of the things we do touch on that with the Clinical Research University when for the new academy for physicians, for clinicians, and that kind of goes back to the basis of education, right? Latinos in clinical research, we are heavy on educating the community in clinical research, but also, you know, educating for work and things like that. Because if for those that are trying to come into the industry or that are trying to make a name for themselves or situate themselves within the industry somehow through business, they need to know, you know, what they're coming up against, or not up against, excuse me, what they're getting themselves into, and how to kind of maneuver through that, right? So Judy and Dan and Monica and Chris, Monica's not here today, but you know, except for me, they're all site owners, and so they understand. They've been through all the trials and errors of these things, and in order for us to not just retain employees through CRO and sponsor, but to retain physicians, right? That are going to ultimately give you a more diverse population. You need to provide them that education and guidance, right? And so there's not much of that there. And so hopefully, you know, through this academy, we're able to help in that aspect. But yeah, it's just another a gap in the system. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, we talk about engagement. There's an issue there. Education, there's an issue there. Awareness as well. You know, people don't have awareness of it. Yes, so many different layers, and then you've got history. You've got cultural biases as well. You know, like again, with the Indian community, it's all about Ayurvedic treatments. You know, they'll go to that first, or homeopathic, before they'll ever go to the doctor. My mum's early 70s. You know, cholesterol's high, but she's still putting ghee in her food because she's been told it's you know, Ayurvedic, it's homeopathic, it'll make her better. But her cholesterol is going to keep going up. So yeah, it's an odd one, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind asking, for your company, is it, you know, would you say that, you know, in the environment right now, that it was quite easy for you to kind of get in and make these conversations, or did you still kind of go through barriers to eventually get into the table to discuss what needs to be discussed and make changes?
Yeah, I think so. I launched Demand Diversity. We did some research in 2019, and that launched May 2020. So the timing there was convenient, if that makes sense. We did it for World Clinical Trials Day. In the US, the conversation is a lot easier. I think the US is more advanced, but I'm having conversations in Europe. You know, medical agencies, local agencies, regulators, they don't think there's an issue. They're like, but why? We've always had blockbuster drugs. Why do we need to change now? And you know, during COVID-19, the pulse oximeter meters that were measuring everything on, they didn't work on dark skin. So would that have been eliminated if that was tested on diverse populations? I think it would have. So yeah, it's harder outside of the US, but in the US it's easier. But I still think in the US it's slightly skewed to, it's not inclusive of the whole population of the US. So I think there's a bit of work still to be done on that. And I think the US still talks in terms of skin color, but there's so many different areas. And when we talk about diversity, we're talking about age, gender, we're talking socioeconomic status, immigrant status, and especially in a country like US and UK, I think they all play a role in how we see healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agree. Gosh, I don't know. There's just so much that needs to get done, but like you're saying, it's I also do think the whole thing about the color, it's we've had multiple conversations, and a lot of it is I mean, not to be so specific, but it's just, well, we're doing this over here. It's like, okay, well, great, that's great that you're making moves and changes in that area. However, when you're dealing with Latinos or other backgrounds, you're dealing with, like you said, immigration. You're also dealing with patriarchal background. You're also dealing with conservatism in its own form, right? And living in a rural area and sometimes not having a lot of education or financial stability and things like that, as opposed to maybe another population. And so you can't address one population like you do the other one and kind of just, cross over real easily. It's not how it works. That's why, it's important to, if you're going to have a point of change, have a table, sit multiple people within that table from those areas that are of representation, and have the conversation and make, changes, cohesively, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean, I 100% agree with what you're saying. If we're just more inclusive, and I think that's the key word, it's not diverse, it's about being inclusive and including everyone. Yeah, we wouldn't need, like Black History Month. Right now is in the US, Asian and Pacific Islander Month. We should be able to celebrate these things all year round without needing these days, months. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, but don't go saying that too loud, okay? Gonna piss off the wrong people.
No, I agree. I mean, that's not my intention, but yeah, I think we need to get to a place where we don't need it. That's right. Which is still a long way.
It's a long way, but I think everything that we're doing in our communities with our organizations, we're going to make a little change and raise more awareness, and hopefully be able, like, for example, what I'm doing in my community, be able to show, hey, this is what I've done and worked, and share that with others so they can learn from that. And hopefully, throughout the years, we'll change this.
I think the problem is that people are trying to find like scalable solutions, and really I think the answer is just like Judy's doing it, like one patient at a time. And like what we're trying to do is, like, we're not even going after the patients right now with LICR. We have enough of a challenge just going after Latinos trying to work in the industry, right? So, and even that's a challenge, but getting patients to enroll in studies, I really think that's just a very one-on-one kind of thing, which pharma doesn't want to do because it's not efficient.
Yeah, it has to be. One size cannot fit all in this one particularly. So I agree with you on that one. Absolutely.
But I don't think they're changing their protocols either, man.
I still
think
feel
they're
like
getting harder.
Yeah, they're trying to still fit that recruitment model and central recruitment campaigns with all sites. And even though it hasn't worked year after year, over all these studies, and they still continue to do it. So when are we going to see the day when they stop doing that and they actually listen to the sites, work one-on-one with them with recruitment?
I agree.
If they're not listening now in 2022, when sites can actually be picky, I don't think they're ever going to listen.
I think I am starting to see, you're now starting to see some pharma companies who are just ahead. They get it. It's not, I mean, in terms of percentage, I'm not going to give it, I don't know the percentage. It's not many, but there are some that are really, really innovative, really willing to go that extra, you know, so they're planning early. I think that is what we need, because with 3 months left of the recruitment window, don't expect us to
Right.
magic, you know.
Well, 3 months left. They don't care who's joining, any color. They just
That's
want
it.
bodies in there.
You know, I do
Absolutely.
agree with what Ash just said right now, because I am working with a sponsor who is all in with recruitment, and pretty much literally has told us whatever you need, we'll give you. Whatever funds you need, we'll give you. Whatever you want to do, we'll give you if you can recruit. And so that's where we're at with that sponsor. And then there's another few sponsors who have incorporated this whole recruitment, diversity, and inclusion campaign into the protocol already before even starting. So they're already thinking ahead. So it's nice to see that now, because I have noticed that, I think, in the past year or two, as I do pre-site visits and site selection visits, that they're actually, I don't have to keep bringing this up. They're already 2 steps ahead.
I agree. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see, you know, we'll see it much more frequently in the next 2 years. But by 2025, you know, the old school protocols will hopefully be the minority rather than most of the protocols. Yeah, fingers crossed. Got to be hopeful.
I definitely think with, you know, organizations like ours and a bunch of other organizations that are out there right now, you know, really starting to stem out, along with, you know, your company and your organization and others like it, right? Kind of coming together, highlighting each other as much as possible, and really making that space so that there's, you know, openness on resources out there, so that, you know, there's not this discussion of, oh, well, we don't know what to do. It's like, well, there's resources, free resources, you know, for you to help and assist. And, you know, that's just, there should be no excuse at that point, right? If there's already things out there that are available to them to utilize. And so, you know, we'll continue to do this, interview great like-minded people like you, Ash, and with your awesome background, and I'm sure the many people that, you know, you work with. And so just keep, you know, putting it out there, and hopefully, you know, at some point making some really big strides with companies, and seeing, you know, what kind of changes we can help implement and fast track.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. No, it's yeah, I think the work you guys are doing, I've watched everything you do, and I'm just really excited that you're doing it. So there's us doing demand diversity, there's you guys, there's Danielle, you know, there are some really, like, I would say, I don't want to say the word powerful, but I mean, like, just who are just doing something good for our industry. And I think, you know, you guys are definitely you know, one of the leaders. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah,
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's this thing called DAO, DAO, decentralized autonomous organizations. I don't know if you guys, probably Ashley is the one who's heard of this, but
Yeah.
it's got me excited because I'm on Twitter and there's these like groups of people, essentially, like, or hypothetically, it would be like geneticists meet up with LICR, meet up with Black women in clinical research, meet up with like a site like Judy's, maybe a site like mine, scientists, a CRO, like a small CRO, and they make, through the blockchain, they'll make like the entire business structure of a pharmaceutical company, basically. So they call the shots for how the study is going to be designed. I mean, if, like, you
Let's
know
get them on
how we're
here.
complaining.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, it's so early, like, you know, there's only like a handful of them on Twitter, and they have like these conversations. I've been trying to get them on the podcast. But there's some smart people. They're like geneticists.
That's where it's going.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe what needs to change is like just the paradigm has to change from the top down. Because
Awesome.
call me skeptical, but I don't think these pharma companies are changing their protocols anytime soon to
No,
accommodate patients.
No, but I do have to say, because I'm in the master's program at UCSD and advanced studies in clinical research, and I've noticed that a lot of those students in there are doctors, and their mindset when it comes to creating protocols or designing protocols, they can do it, they're great, they understand the therapeutic area, but when it comes to the realistic like how that's actually going to work in a real life setting. They don't understand that, and they don't really have that training, and they're not really getting that training so much in the program. So I've actually, like, I've done some presentations here and there for projects where I talk about recruitment and diversity and thinking, like, what's realistic for the patient? Could they really do these visits? Could they actually come in and do these procedures? And so I think there needs to be more of that, especially if they're going through these various training courses that exist, you know, if they're getting trained on research already. And I think that seems to be missing in some of these trainings. So hopefully we'll see if it can improve.
Let's see, but Ash, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody go check out Ash's LinkedIn underneath the video. And if you're listening on our podcast, thank you. And check it out in the show notes. And it'd be good to network and do a part 2 and maybe look at some other like practical things that us in the industry can do to increase inclusion.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Ash.
That's
Thank
nice
you.
meeting
Thank you very much. You too. All right. Take care.